Hello everybody, this is Craig from Bass Lessons Melbourne, and for today's player profile I am joined by Kaveh Rastegar.
Hey Craig, hey everybody, thanks for having me.
Normally I would do shake your hand, but can't really do that anymore.
No, we don't do, I was against it to begin with. I just thought it was just such a filthy habit. So, I was doing the elbow bump before, everyone was.
I was thinking maybe you were either just you make out or nothing.
It was you already. Oh my goodness. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Okay. Yeah, that got a bit glitchy there, didn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Let me just double check. I don't have anything going. All right, cool. So you're in LA, is that right?
That's right. I'm in Los Angeles. I've lived here for years and years. It's not where I'm from originally, but I definitely claim this as home.
You're a Montreal boy, is that right?
Yeah, that's where I was born. I was born in Montreal, and my mom and dad and I were there for a short period of time. It was kind of by chance that my dad ended up there originally, and then eventually the whole family, the three of us, moved to Denver, Colorado, where the two of them had met actually. And I grew up in Denver from the time I was about 3 years old or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking Denver's kind of a hotbed for the kind of jam band scene?
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say like a cow town and a cowboy town, and it's that too.
Okay.
It's a place. Yeah, it's
cowboys and stone jammers.
Yeah, cowboys and hacky sacks and weed and really long jams. But also, a lot more than that. But then that definitely exists there.
Yeah, and was that a factor in your kind of musical development, the jam band thing, the jam scene?
For me, not really. I kind of, I grew up, my stepfather, my mom and dad split up when I was really young, and she was with a man who's a guitar player and a musician. His name's Mike Johnson. He's in this band called Thinking Plague. They're like a in small but very dedicated circles, they're pretty well known, like progressive rock group, like art rock, or I'm not even sure what the genre is, but it's pretty like, intense music, like through composed music. And he's the guitar player, composer for that band. So I grew up hearing a lot of that music and getting made and composed, and then and then there's tons of music playing in the house, at their house, and then also at my dad's house. Just everyone was a big music fanatic. So not too many jam bands, but it was like kind of everything from, my dad's side, like tons of Stevie Wonder and, Muddy Waters and Freddie King and Albert King and, classic rock. And then also jazz music, Stanley Tarantine and Miles Davis and then newer rock that was coming out. And then at my mom's house, there's a lot of like Joni Mitchell and Kate Bush was a big one that was always played. And The Police was always being played in the house. The Police and Peter Gabriel, and so a lot of
pretty healthy spread.
Man, yeah, anybody I talk to about my musical path, like I can't gloss over that, how important that was. Like just those like quintessential records playing from. Well, you're a new father, and just having just the effect of the music, playing just different kinds of music playing at all times was huge with me.
Whatever, I'll stick on something. It could be, some Scandinavian death metal, or it could be like the new Lettuce album, and it kind of has the same effect on a 14-month-old. He's like, this is stimulating my auditory senses and I like it. It's really fascinating.
That's wonderful. I mean, yeah, there's, you just don't have that. You don't have that filter. And my kids are older right now. Their filter's starting to pop in, and it's good to have that. But it's like they're about 8 and about 10, 7 and 9, and they're starting to be like, yeah, Dad, I think that's not cool. Like the music you're playing, like they're starting to develop their own tastes, which is kind of cool. But I made sure to get as much. What's that?
You had a good run.
We had a good, I had a good run. But I mean, for me, it's like it all came, like a big record being in the house from the second I was, able to just be in the world would be the Harder They Come soundtrack with Jenny Cliff and Toots and the Maytals and Desmond Decker. And then Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions was just always playing in the house, always. And, and to this day, those, I'm big on talking about those like DNA kind of records, and so, but then for me, like I loved all of that music. And then I really got into my own thing, which kind of led to playing music.
So Inner Visions it's a pretty heavy bass album.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have you really dug into those lines, or was it more just you absorbed it and then when you started playing bass that wasn't something that you were checking out?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it was so funny. Like I spent so much time hearing that music. And it wasn't until maybe the last 10, 12 years or 15, 10, 12 years that I've started to really learn that music, because music from, I think, for me, it was like certain albums and certain sounds were just like, it wasn't even like, you couldn't touch it. You couldn't, I
know what you mean. It is almost like you don't want to unravel the magic.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like unravel like the mystery of like what, and analyze it, and, or for me, I was definitely that type of musician when I was with those records, and not all musicians are. I was really like, there were albums that I was picking out and learning that were just really relevant to me at the time that I started playing bass. But the real fundamental like DNA records I didn't start getting into maybe until my like mid-20s. And it was like, then it was like, oh my God, that's what that is. And just kind of like looking at it for what it is, and making the connection, like that has a huge emotional connection. This song has a huge emotional connection to me, Abbey Road, like what is Paul McCartney doing on that, on that record? And it's like,
he's just making it up really as he goes along. I think he was just jamming.
He was just jamming. Yeah, he was.
He just thought it was just demos, nothing important.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, it's pretty wonderful. Like just how it kind of keeps, there's always things to learn, and then you're just always looking at things from different angles, and it takes on new meaning the more you turn it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So at what point did you move from Denver to LA, and why?
Well,
or is there somewhere in between?
Yeah, I'll back up into my story a little bit. Like from when I started, I started playing music when I was 9 in the school band, which is, a lot of people took that for granted that was there, because now it's not so much of a, given that you'd have those opportunities. But I played saxophone in the school band when I was 9. And my dad really wanted me to become a jazz musician, which is, my dad's Iranian. He's an Iranian man, which I talk about this a lot, where it's like, the stereotype with a lot of Iranian parents are like, you can be whatever you want. You can be a doctor or an engineer, And there's a big drive towards the academics and those kind of things. And my dad really doesn't fit the mold for that kind of a thing. He's a chef, and he's you know, he was a huge music fan, and he was just like, you got to become a jazz musician, which is really funny, you know, thing to push on your kid, like when you know what that life really entails. And but yeah, I played sax in school band, and I was pretty good, but it wasn't necessarily the instrument that I was really feeling. But I played sax from the time I was 9 till like through high school, like, until I was 17. So, but I started playing, you know, right around the time I was like 11 years old. I really started getting into punk rock, you know, and reggae. And I was really into like American punk rock bands, like, you know, Minor Threat or Suicidal Tendencies or the Dead Kennedys or Fear or the Bad Brains. Bad Brains was a huge one. And then I also really loved Peter Tosh, and other stuff like that band Jaluka, Johnny Clegg's band, was South African, kind of like they were like a real like anti-apartheid South African group that kind of played pop music mixed with like South African music, and then I was really into the Talking Heads, and anyway, I started playing the bass right around the time I was 12. I picked up an old acoustic guitar at the house, and The Cure had just come out with that album, Disintegration, and there's a song called Fascination Street on that album. Simon Gallup's the bass player on that, and he just plays this like fantastic bass line with the pick, and it's got this growly kind of a thing. And I just remember picking up an acoustic guitar and kind of learning that, picking out, you know, with one finger with my left hand, learning that bass line. And I broke the strings on that guitar. And, you know, later on, I think for my 13th birthday, my mom got me a bass from a kid at the school. She bought it for $50. It was a 75 Fender Music Master, which I was recently reacquainted with. I now have my first bass again. And anyway, I was kind of off and running, just jumping into learning bass lines of, you know, and then picking up anything I could anywhere. And luckily, like a couple of years into playing, I fell into a clique of musicians in Denver who were right around the same age as I was. And I saw them at a show, like a local band concert, you know, outside. There was it was kind of like a battle of the bands thing. And there were these like kind of freaky looking dudes that kind of look like, you know, there's all these bands that were playing with like older people, you know, that seemed like they could be ancient, you know, they're in their probably late 20s, but they seemed like they could have been in, you know, in their 50s or 60s. And to me at that time, and then there was all of a sudden this band popped up and they started doing a little line check, and they were all like kind of scraggly, you know, hippie looking guys, no shirts on, and just kind of, they looked funny, like they would be funny people. And they started to play, and it was like, Jesus, these guys are just killing. They're so good. Like the second each of them played their instrument when they did their line check, and then they played their little gig, and I was just hooked. And then a week later, I was at a Primus show. I was really into Primus.
Okay.
As, you know, maybe a lot of electric bass players were.
So,
you know,
what
90s.
What years is this approximately?
So this would have been 1990, 90 or 91, I guess.
Okay.
And I was out in front of a show of theirs, and I saw a kid who was wearing a T-shirt with that band's name on them, and the band was called the Psychedelic Zombies.
Okay.
But they weren't a jam band. It's like such a jam band name. And they were like a horn band. They were like a Tower of Power. Like they were like super
Right.
killing, kind of a Tower of Power group. But then they were all like 18, 19-year-olds who were just, you know, freaks. And then we were all into Fishbone, and we were all really into the music coming out, like Mr. Bungle. you know, all that stuff. And
That's the macaroni.
oh yeah, and they were like just you know, so I met those guys, and they became my closest friends. And they were like the big band in Denver at the time, and Fishbone or like No Doubt would come when they were just the beginning, and they would open for the Zombies.
Right.
And then they did little tours with Fishbone, and I got to be a tech for them right around the time I was 15 and 16. And
That must have been eye-opening.
it was incredible just to get to hear Fish play the drums every night, you know, and going back to that group of people, a few of those people are still people I work with. Like the guitar player in the Zombies is, you know, Josh Lopez, who, you know, we ended up, I mean, we play together all the time. We wrote a song with Bruno Mars together. We wrote a song for that Queen and Slim film that came out last fall. And the drum, you know, we're all really good friends. And that was like, for me, like the first in a, you know, or one of the big kind of things in a series of just kind of portals that I kept going into, that you just get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into making music. And, you know, just finding my tribe really was what that was. And then from there, I was just in tons of bands in Denver, you know, and there was a really vibrant music scene there. And I had bands with my friends, and then there was all types of other bands you could be in, and, you know, like reggae bands and salsa bands and playing jazz stuff or hip hop. There's a lot of hip hop kind of stuff. And it kind of went from there.
Did you ever get to meet the guys in No Doubt?
Oh yeah. We I mean, like that was, you know, I mean, that was probably 91, 92 when they were doing shows with those guys.
Was that just before Don't Speak came out?
No, it was just before they broke. It was maybe a year and a half or so before I'm Just a Girl came out. And they had a couple of other albums. It was, I guess, on their second album.
Right.
And I remember I was probably 16 and that was funny too, because so the keyboard player in that band is a guy, his name is Keith Chauncia, or the keyboard player in the Zombies. His name is Keith Chauncia, and he was the first one to move to Los Angeles. He moved to LA in probably 91. And so he was like the first of the Colorado people that really started doing stuff. And he really kind of fell into a scene where he met Lonnie Marshall, who, I don't know if you know who he is. Lonnie's a fantastic bass player. And Lonnie was like, became a real mentor to me. And Lonnie and Keith, or Keithus, started a band called Weapon of Choice. And they were a really fantastic band. So for any listener out there, you should listen to that music. Yep. And then Lonnie's brother, his little brother, is Arik Marshall. And Arik, right around that time, John Frusciante from the Red Hot Chili Peppers had just left the Chili Peppers. And Arik got the gig as the guitar player for the Chili Peppers. So I just remember that period where it's like we were in high school and our friend Arik is playing in the Chili Peppers. And it just seemed like music was like, you could do it. Like, this is like
happening.
Yeah, you could play music, and to get that exposure was so invaluable, you know. And but yeah, so I just remember, you know, sitting at the Mercury Cafe, which is where I played my first gig. But I remember I was sitting there, I was next to Lonnie, and then Gwen Stefani was there with the bass player Tony, and they were right across from Lonnie and I remember just seeing Gwen like whispering under her breath to Tony, like, "That's Lonnie Marshall." Like, you know, like he's the guy, you know. And but you know, it was an incredible time to kind of come up. And
I remember doing or reading an interview with Tony. Is it Tony Canal? Tony
Canal.
Or hearing a story about how he got the gig for No Doubt. Do you know this? Have you heard about that?
No.
my recollection is that basically he auditioned, like he was a fan of the band and he auditioned and he learned like the 3 songs or whatever, but he'd never really played bass before. He just learned the song and then
Right.
he
Just learned the part.
Yeah.
I mean, but everybody was so young, you know. Adrian, I remember the drummer had just joined, you know, around then. And I think the same could be said for him too, where it's like he hadn't really played the drums at all, you know, and he was just kind of getting it together. And but they were incredible. They were an incredible band, like especially at the Mercury Cafe. Like she's just such an amazing front person and just so, and they had great songs. And but I remember the last time like really kind of seeing them, like, you know, and I remember they were really burnt out. They were just like, you know, sleeping in garages, and like they had to finish this album, which was Tragic Kingdom, but they finished it in, you know, maybe 6 different studios, and they were like at the end of their rope. Gwen's brother had just quit the band, and you know, it's just like it was a make or break point for them. And I remember they gave me the demo, or the, you know, the cassette tape of I'm Just a Girl, and something else was on there, and then, you know, they blew up. They totally blew up, and it was crazy to, you know,
that's
see.
a pretty good bass album as well, actually. Like his lines and his tone on that album are pretty big.
Incredible. And he's just so fun to watch. He would like stalk the stage. He was like a, you know, a jaguar. You know, just kind of like, he would wear this like jumpsuit and just kind of like stalk around the stage and stare at people in the audience. And I remember really, you know, getting started trying to play bass and, you know, play like tour and all that stuff. And I could never do that because I'm almost 6'6", and it just looks so freakish. Like if I try to do that, you know, like stare someone down like that, it's just pretty
slightly intimidating.
Yeah, slightly intimidating. You know, takes away from the fun. But anyway, he's fantastic.
So people started, I guess what you're saying, people started to kind of move from Denver to LA, and you were like, well, maybe that's a thing.
Kind of, yeah. So yeah, like everybody in my little scene had moved to LA, and that was like the big scene close to Denver, or relatively close. And around that time, through a lot of those guys in that band, the horn players, I started really getting interested in playing, because I was self-taught. I got interested in playing, you know, jazz music or music that just got deeper into harmony, you know, and deeper into. And so I remember through a lot of those players, just getting introduced to a young bass player at the time. I was 16, and this guy was 19 years old. His name was Fontaine Burnett. He currently lives in Germany. And I would go over to Fontaine's place, and he would play me music. You know, he was like the badass in Denver at the time, like 19 years old. He was playing bass with great double bassist and great electric bassist, but he was playing bass with Ron Miles. I don't know if you know Ron Miles is definitely one of our mentors in our band Kneebody later. And Ron's a trumpet player in Denver who's played with Bill Frisell for years and years and years, but also made so many incredible records, and is just like a real giant, an artistic giant in our musical world. And Fontaine was his bass player. So it was just so cool to get to hang with Fontaine. I would just go over to his house, and we'd listen to, he would show me, you know, he was really into Prince. So we would like check out the Black Album and Levi Caesar, and we would check out, and then bass wise, we'd also check out Mingus, like Charles Mingus Presents. Charles Mingus is a big record that we would listen to. And we would also listen to Al McDowell, who was playing with Ornette, along with Jamaluddin Takuma, who was also playing with Ornette Coleman.
Okay.
And we would listen to those records, and we would listen to, and then I was really into, there's a PIL record called Cassette, or it's like, if you get it on a tape, it's called cassette. If you get it on a CD, it's called compact disc. It's like a generic concept. Okay. And the producer for that record, PIL, Public Interest Limited, is the John Lydon or Johnny Rotten's band, post Sex Pistols. And the producer for that particular album was Bill Laswell. And Bill Laswell For those of you who don't know, is like just fantastic producer, but great bass player, amazing bass player, and just kind of like amazing kind of like a Svengali, like where he'd put together these projects with different, you know, personalities, and they would always have this kind of mysterious side, and sometimes they would just have these like freak of nature, you know, like, so that album, that PIL record had, you know, Johnny Rotten, but it also had Tony Williams playing drums on a song, and Ginger Baker playing drums on another song, and Steve Vai playing guitar, you know, like, but it didn't have the credits were not, you know, they were not overblown. And in fact, it was, you know, like the opposite of overblown promotion. The whole concept was this generic record, you know, very punk rock, but it has these people in it, and it's just a beautiful record. And so Laswell at the time had all these amazing projects. What's that?
Everybody needs a gig.
Yeah. No, Laswell had amazing records at the time. This project called Material, and Material was like, you know, a new kind of assemblage of people. And the record, I remember Fontaine and I were listening to a lot. It was this record called The Third Power, and it had, you know, Herbie Hancock, and then it also had Bootsy Collins was on it, and a lot of the Jungle Brothers were on it. I was really into hip hop. Shabba Ranks is on it. You know, all different kinds of people. Some of the last poets are on this record. And so for me, and then I just kind of around that time just started meeting a lot of jazz musicians. And that's when I met, right around the time I met Shane Inslee, who's a trumpet player, who we went on to form the band Kneebody with years later. But we met each other right around that time, right around when I was 18.
Are you playing upright at 18?
18 is right around when I started. I actually started when I was 19. So my whole thing was I was self-taught, and after high school, I didn't go to college, and I was already gigging and doing little tours, mm-hmm. and making, you know, paying for my apartment with, you know, with gigs. And 1 year went by, and, you know, and I was also a bike messenger on and off, you know, doing that kind of, you know, just odd jobs, but then mostly gigging. And then another year went by. And by that second year, there was definitely a scene where it's like, I had a band with Shane, and we were playing, you know, doing gigs like opening for the Roots and playing gigs with the Charlie Hunter Trio, and just like doing really cool things in the scene there. Mm-hmm. And playing original music. And I was so challenged by him. His playing was so great. And then getting to play with some of the older, you know, maybe like late 20s, early 30s jazz musicians. And we would, so right around that time, like that other year went by without going to college. And it was like, if I go into another year, I'll just never go. And so I remember, you know, I just started when I was 19 going to music school in Northern Colorado. It was super affordable, and you know, we didn't really have the money to do anything else. And it was incredible. I remember I was in maybe 10 or 11 bands, and then I quit all the bands. I was in this reggae band, this great reggae group, and we had just played Red Rocks at Reggae on the Rocks. Wow. And that was my last gig with them. And I started at UNC, Northern Colorado. And then that's when I started playing upright, studying upright bass. And from there it was like, you know, I studied bass with this guy, Jim Vaughn, who was there. And then at that time, Shane had transferred to a school in New York called the Eastman School of Music. Mm-hmm. And the next summer, Shane was just like, he came back, he was like, man, you got to go to Eastman. It's incredible, blah, 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 blah. The scene's really great there. And I never heard of Eastman. And I was like, okay, cool. How do I go? And that's this classical conservatory that the other bass players there are just like, have been playing double bass. They're, since they were probably 8 years old.
Yeah, is it right?
And so I started taking lessons with this guy, Kenneth Harper, who sadly passed away. He was the associate principal bassist in the Colorado Symphony. And that whole second year of school just was shedding and just trying to put myself in a position to audition to go to Eastman.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, you're saying you're self-taught. I mean, how formal would you say you taught yourself? I mean, did you learn how to read music? Were you, theory, or was it more just learning songs and the mechanics of the instrument?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I school band with saxophone. It's a different clef, and so. But with electric bass, I was completely self-taught, and but that with the caveat of there were a lot of mentors that would show me things, and I was always putting myself in positions where I get to play with people like who were just fantastic people, and thankfully, a lot of people would take me under their wing, and I also had a real kind of knack for a thing that I would do, like a certain kind of playing that I could do, like. I always wrote, whatever it was, I always came up with like licks or grooves. And for that time, I had a pretty strong sense of time and feel and groove. And,
yep.
And I kind of fell into those situations a lot, but kept hitting my head up against the wall where it's like, I would, around the time I was 18, I would get called onto a gig where I had to have charts or God forbid, I had to sight read a melody on the bass or whatever. And it really wasn't until I was, 19 starting college that I had already had this good, like 4 or 5 years of like solid professional experience where it was like, I knew what I was going to get into when I got out of school. So I felt like I really knew the questions to ask, and I knew what work I had to do. It's like, I got to be able to sight read. I got to understand what these, like how to do this. And then, I was just like, I need to have a teacher. I've never had it, aside from a couple of little lessons that I had. Like I had a little stint back in Montreal after high school, and I took a few lessons with this guy who's a great bass player named George Mitchell in Montreal. So I think I took 3 lessons with him. And he was fantastic. And he was playing, he would do like the gigs with like, Joe Henderson came to Montreal. He would be the bass player. Like he would be like the ringer for the badasses that would come to town, and
that's where you want to get your lessons from.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but for me, yeah, when I finally went to school at UNC, I mean, and I was an electric bass player, so they didn't accept me they didn't have that as a study. Like, because I didn't play upright at the time, I had to declare what my instrument was, and the only instrument I qualified as was a singer. So they had me as a singer in the Glee Club. So that's what for my 2 years at University of Northern Colorado, I was in the Glee Club as a singer, but I was also taking bass lessons, and I was playing in the orchestra and every kind of ensemble I could, and learning theory, formal theory, and studying Bach chorales and doing all that stuff. And I remember my dad, he had moved to California by that time. He called me. He was like, what's it like? What's school like? Because, I had my apartment, I was gigging, I was doing and now I'm like, I just took the step back. And I remember talking to him and just going like, well, it's pretty cool. Like all I have to do is show up and just practice the bass all the time. And then you can go to this like dining hall and just eat sandwiches and cereal whenever you want, and, you've got your friends there, and that's all you have to do. And it's like, I remember that feeling. It was kind of like a victory, where it's just like, this is great.
It's like a musical paradise.
It was. And so that second year there, I just remember, just feeling like I wasn't challenged enough. There were, it was a great school, and it was a great school for certain things, but for what I wanted to do, there wasn't that high level of, you know, I guess you call it creative musicians or kind of that kind of scene going on. And that's, you know, Shane telling me about what was going on in at Eastman really just got me into like, okay, I got to get out there. And so that's what I ended up kind of hooking up an audition, and not without the help of, you know, Shane, who was just an incredible musician at the time. He was one of those guys, like when we were 18, he was already like the man. He was already so good.
So you just hung on to his coattails as long as you could.
That's basically it. That's my career in a nutshell. I'm like the quintessential coattail writer. But yeah, and I got into Eastman, and that's where I finished, you know, school. I was there for 2 years, and it was only 2 years of my life, but it was so formative, because that school at that time, the jazz department only had 30 people. So everyone really knew each other and they knew how they played. And you got this real intense kind of time with each other. And
plus being in New York, I mean, that's just an education in itself, surely.
Yeah, well, Eastman's in Rochester. So Rochester's like another world altogether. But yeah, I was that guy. I was that guy that was like, I'm pretty much in New York. So just to give you an idea, Rochester is a 9 or an 8 hour or 9 hour bus ride from New York City.
Okay, right.
And I would do it. I would do it almost every weekend. I would get out of school and I would go straight to the bus station and take an overnight bus to Manhattan. And I would, and by that time Shane was living in Manhattan. So I would camp out. So I remember a couple times, like he lived near Tompkins Square Park, and I would just kind of camp out front of his house until he woke up. And then I would just crash there for the weekend. And then I'd take the late night bus back.
Wow. Just really, I mean, from the age of 18, you basically, it seems like you're just doing whatever it takes to make it. Yeah. It's like,
oh yeah. Like, I mean, there's nothing like that feeling of just kind of knowing what it is that you're going to do. And then also, like, something I talk about a lot with people is just like seeing, like having a small victory, you know, early on, you know, like where it's like, whatever it is, like learning that cure bass line, or if you want to, you know, like, you know, just if there's something you kind of just want to do and you do it, and then that'll spur you on to, you know, more of those things, hopefully, and more. And luckily, you know, that really was a thing for me, you know, and I really kind of kept blinders too. Like I kept that sense of like, you know, oh shit, you're never going to be able to do this. You know, like that was never an option. And I was so lucky to be surrounded by people who were just doing it. Not to mention my stepfather and his whole scene, that it was just like, yeah, of course you'd do that. Like, you know, yeah, you know, of course you play in a shitty club somewhere, and, or, you know, like there was never that thing of like, man, are you going to make, you know, how much money are you going to make? Or like, you know, there's never like, thank God, you know, cause you probably know people like this. I just remember people that were like, you know, fantastic musicians, like just fantastic technicians that could do all this stuff, but they almost got that too easily. And they were like, I just remember a couple of people in particular that were just so consumed with that thing of like, how am I going to make a living, or how is this even practical, or how, and it kind of
stuff doesn't really, you know, for me anyway, it didn't really come to my head until I was a lot older. Maybe it should have come earlier. I don't know, but
right. Yeah, like,
just like
maybe
music's a thing that I can do and get by. All right, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, totally. Like, yeah, for me, it was just like, you know, early on where it's just like, are you kidding me? You know, like I get to play with that drummer and I get free coffee and I get $7 at the end of the night. What? You know, like win, like that's a triple win, you know,
it's all about,
you know,
right?
Yeah. But, yeah, so so that was like, like, those are the early years. And then, and then from there, that was, like, so I was in Rochester at that time, and that was really where it was like, do you go to New York, which is where a lot of those people at Eastman were from the East Coast already. And a lot of those people were already automatically going to New York. But I had all my Denver people in LA, and they were already playing with like massive bands. They were playing with, at the time, Macy Gray had just come out. And a lot of those guys were in Macy's band, and Everlast was another big band at the time, and Keefus was in Everlast, and there was stuff going on in Los Angeles that it was like, I just kind of had my mind set on, I had a little bit of an in. I had my mind set on going there just from the first time I set foot there, and so I moved there in '99, and I remember Shane moved there at the same time, and so did Ben Wendell, who we all went to Eastman, and
21 years ago. Sorry, I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, God, it's crazy. And then that whole thing, it's just like, it does definitely seem like the other day that we all moved out here, but yeah, and then that's when that group of musicians really started playing consistently, where it was like, we started playing at we met Nate Wood because Adam Benjamin was going to CalArts with him, and we all kind of got together like right out of the gates, started playing little gigs, and then we started playing at a cafe in UCLA every Monday, and it was, we didn't
for
make any
anyone who's listening or watching that's familiar with Kneebody, how would you pitch it?
Yeah, exactly. Kneebody is this band that it's a band of writers, like everybody in the band writes music, and it's a collective. It was this for me. I haven't been a part of the band for the last year and a half, maybe 2 years now, but we're all still great friends. But it started off as this band where it was like a place to kind of workshop songs, and everybody in the band wrote. So I remember our first gig, we'd get together and we would teach songs to each other by ear. And that was like it became like kind of like music school again, where it's like we all had bands that we were in, and musical jobs, or like I was in a couple of groups, like singer-songwriters that were a little established and doing some recording work and playing a bunch of gigs around town, and same with everybody else in the band. But we had this band where we would get together, and we had a Monday night gig at a club in LA that was a steady gig, and we could workshop songs. And so it started off as a song band like that, and that was really where we had something that we could kind of like gravitate towards, and we could just instantly see how it worked on a crowd, and instantly see how it worked. And then all of these things sprung out from the band. Like, we just started really taking it seriously and touring, and making more records and doing all that stuff. And it really became this band where there's a lot of things that are unique about it, where one of the things, there's a video, I think it's like on a drum channel, DW drum channel video, where we kind of show this whole cueing concept that we.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that at some point.
Yeah. So that whole cueing concept came from that band, and for those of you who don't know, it's this thing where, like, in the middle of like, we can play these aural, these aural cues that'll change the direction of the music while we're playing it. And that's not new, that's just happened in music for centuries, where it's like you have a call and response that would mean something, or like in traditional jazz music, you have, you know what that means, right? It means to end the song.
That's how you end. That's how you're meant to end every jazz song, right?
Right. Or like, like people could just plug that in and everybody knows that's how you end. Yeah, that's how you end every jazz song.
Yeah.
Yes. But we kind of started developing things like that, where it's like a little lick that was in one of Shane's songs, this kind of angular lick that would happen. There's this thing in 7 where you have like like everybody does that. That's the answer to that call. And that became a thing that we would just stop a song. So it had this like weird, like angular thing happening, and then everyone going, and it's like, whoa. And as a listener, it's like, it's captivating, where it's just like, these guys are jamming, they're doing whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, it stops. And then from there,
from a listener or compositional perspective, one of the things that works is enough repetition so that we can enjoy it, but enough surprise so that we keep listening, right?
Totally. Like, yeah, you want to put yourself in the place of the listener, and you kind of, I think that ears crave a sense of like that balance between order and disorder, and structure and chaos, and that was something that we really had fun with. And there would be different cues that you could change kind of any parameter of the music. It's like once we figured out that we could create this language and everybody was up for it, we kind of kept going further and further into things where it's like you could tell people to do things, or everyone had their own musical name. You could cue people in, cue people out. You could do
does it ever
slow down, speed up,
get out of hand? Like,
yeah,
just be like a whole gig of just cueing everybody and just
yes. Totally, like a circus, like like the band, kind of like a car, like a car with like a diesel engine, and you put unleaded gasoline in it, and it just keeps like sputtering and going, yeah, like that kind of stuff would happen, especially when the band was like really working that stuff out, where it's like there is definitely a period of like 2 years where it's just like any recording you hear of us during that period, you just hear this like what, but in general, it was always meant as this thing where you want to make the music work. And the cool thing about it is like, there's like, you can't really, you can override somebody's cue. Like you can tell somebody like, no, that's not what I want to do. But the idea is that we're all doing it for the good of the song. We're all doing it for the good of the moment. It's like, so it's like you really respect someone's
you drill down deeper, and ultimately it's about trust.
Yes, very much so. And and that's really what that band was too. It was like a real home base where we're all such close friends first, Yeah.
And that was pretty I guess useful, for want of a better word, just to have a writing platform like that of such high caliber, that you could just present anything and hear it back at you, quite as good as what you could imagine, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was and challenging and overwhelming, but also like really trusting. And the thing that was cool was that, like I said earlier, that all of the songs were always taught by ear. Everybody in the band writes, is literate, and everybody are, we're all great readers. But you know how it is when you get music, on the page, and how kind of tough it is to get away from the page.
Yep.
And especially when you're seeing a band, like we were a band that we were playing in clubs and bars, and we didn't want to be that band that brought in the music stands, or like they're just gazing at their shoes at the chart, And
can you move that front table just back a few feet so we can put our music stands down here, kind of thing?
Exactly. Like we wanted, and there's this thing where it's like, I definitely came from that, like, that thing, that DIY, like, it's like fuck that. Like, I want to be in your face kind of thing. Like, I want to be like, and everybody else kind of shared a little bit of that too, where it's just like, we want to just be like playing your face off. And then also, oh, what happened? Oh my gosh. Fantastic.
I was wondering if that was going to happen. Thank you.
I'm glad that happened. Yeah. No, we didn't want that. We didn't want that like that music stand vibe. And you know, also like you don't internalize the music as well. You don't, and so we learned everything by ear.
Our Power don't do it, and there's a lot of notes and a lot of songs.
Well, there's a ton of songs, and that was the thing. That was what's so cool. Like it's realizing how much you can really do with your mind, the power of your brain. And it really was. It really was cool. Just like being like there's a song on our first album that's called "Climb," and
I forget the name of it there, and that would have been amazingly ironic.
Yeah, exactly. How could they remember it? Yeah, I can't remember the name of the song. There's a song called "Climb," and it's especially for Shane and Ben. This song is this incredible song that Ben wrote, where it's like this beautiful, like kind of, you know, long form bass line, basically, that has like implied harmony, kind of like a Paul Motion song. And it's got this long form bass line, and then basically what he did is he like maybe he had those changes going. This is when he wrote it. He took a solo over the changes, you know, and he took this solo, and he took a really like melodic, beautiful, you know, and he recorded it on his, you know, on Pro Tools or his tape deck or something on his mini. I think it was on his mini disc. That's true. And he recorded on a mini disc, and it was like 3 minutes or something of just him just kind of playing, and, you know, parts where he's like shredding a little bit and just doing this stuff over this long form solo. And then they transcribed it. And then they learned every bit of that melody and that solo, and that became the melody. Like
Right.
That's the example of like the crazy commitment. And I remember, you know, when we were learning that song, that was a period we were in our early 20s, and I remember the week we were learning that song, we were all up in, I think it's called Inverness, which is this, you know, we had a friend of a friend who had a cabin. What's that?
Inverness. It's a pretty well-known town in Scotland.
Okay, yeah. Well, we were in the lesser known town north of San Francisco called Inverness. But but we were camped out in the studio. We ended up with this opportunity where just like there was a studio with a couple like a bedroom or two, and we were just there for like 3 or 4 days. And so we would wake up and just play music and work on songs. And I remember we really worked on that song "Climb" during that time. You know, it took forever to learn that stuff, but it's like the thing is like the more you do that, then the band became like, you know, everybody living in different cities across the country, you know, like 2 of the guys living in New York, somebody living in Denver, I'm in LA, and then somebody living in Reno. But we would come together for tours, and we could play that music pretty quickly because we had all put it together by memory, you know, and we would have a sound check where we would be like, you know, shedding the tunes, but then we're already pretty much there, you know.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how many? What? So, try to form this question. The recording process for that band, was it like? Is it always more kind of? Let's just try and capture the energy of a gig, or did you ever approach it more like, let's try and, you know, orchestrate something a little bit more and use the tools of the studio?
Yeah, we try both for different albums. So like for our first album, we were just really getting it together. And also everybody had various layers of fluency in the studio. We had all been recording as, you know, young musicians a fair amount at that point, but Nate Wood in particular, he's such a polymath and such a freak of nature and such a talent and just a really incredible musician. And he had, you know, as the drummer alone, but plays amazing bass, incredible bass, and then plays great guitar, sings, has perfect pitch.
Wayne Krantz. He's done some Wayne Krantz on bass and drums. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he was a huge fan of Wayne's too before he started playing with him. I mean, he was the first one to kind of show us Wayne's music. But yeah, so Nate's dad and mom are both great musicians, and Nate's dad has a studio, and Nate kind of grew up in the studio. So he already had this kind of this ability to just find his way around the studio and use the gear and engineer and stuff. And he's also become a really successful engineer since then. And at that time, like when we made our first record, it was really like it was a real studio project. And we actually had 2 records before the first Kneebody record. We had a record with Shane Inslee's record, which is called Second Guess. And that was an album that is just, to this day, I mean, my playing on it, I'm not super proud of, but I just love the record so much. It's like, it's beautiful, like beautiful songs. And like, there's so much about it that's like really, Shane's writing is so great. And then everybody's playing is so great. And the production on it is really great. I co-produced it with Shane, but Shane really was like the main driver of the ship. And so we had that record with a couple of other friends. And then we had this other record. There's this band that we had called Wendell, which was, it was Ben, and it was all of Kneebody minus Shane. And that's because Shane was playing with
all of Kneebody minus Ben.
Yes, and it's called Wendell. Yeah, minus Ben, but only in name. But so by the time we made that first Kneebody record, it was kind of like a studio project, and there's a lot of overdubbing going on. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of, sometimes I would put 2 basses on something, or
just when nobody was looking.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you guys I just want to fix some parts.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Yeah, I'm not going to go to lunch. There, and then and you can hear that on that first Kneebody record. There's a moment. There's a song called "Halfway to Scranton" that Shane wrote, where I think there's bassoon in there. Ben's a great bassoonist, so like there's some bassoon in there. And it's piano. Like they had written this like chorale in the middle of this, this section, and so there's like the use of the studio, as you'd say, and like we made a record like "You Can Have Your Moment" is I think our 3rd album. And that one's like a real playing album, like where it's like everyone's playing. And then there's an album called The Line that we did that's really like, or The Line or the one after that, Anti-Hero. Like those two are like really like good combinations of like, you got the performance, but then if it's needed, we're going to like make it a studio thing. And like by that point we had gotten like pretty...
You want to present the material in the best way possible.
Yeah. And then, we started making kind of some live albums too, like that were recorded along the way that just kind of documented. And then that was at the beginning of like the whole YouTube thing and the video thing. So then concert videos started coming out and like little like fan videos and all that stuff. So people could see how the band played. So it became like, if you're going to make a record,
a positive influence at that time.
Yeah. That, that we took advantage of, yet we didn't know how to take advantage of in some ways. And, you just make use of it however you can.
Yeah. So how would you say, your time in LA or your experience of LA has changed, over the years? Like, did you immediately get into the session scene? Is that something you've ever really plugged into in LA, or is it more kind of original projects, jumping from one to the next kind of thing, as opposed to, can you come and do the session tomorrow at 3? What's been that balance like over the time you've been there?
It's for me, it was kind of like I started out definitely as a band guy, like I was in a band or 2, but then I was also, when I first moved here, I was like in every band possible. And it was luck.
A common theme with you.
Yeah, totally. And if you ask my friends, they'll laugh about that. Like, it's just not, it's not funny sometimes that how much I would overextend myself. But when I first moved to LA, when we first moved to LA, there was this a club in Santa Monica that opened opened right around the same time, and there were just two great club owners, a husband and wife, Louis and Nettie Ryan, and the booking agent that they hired for that club was right around our age, this woman, Megan Jacobs. And we were all really good friends. Anyways, this place called the Temple Bar, and it was just it was home base for our whole music scene. And it was like, so on top of that, like on top of Kneebody and all that stuff, there's all the Denver guys that are there. And there was this guy, Jeff Gallegos, who's in the Zombies from way back when I was coming up, that started this hip hop orchestra. So that was in '99. We started this group called Dakar, which grew to be like 70 musicians, like a massive, like full on Mahler sized orchestra with MCs and all that stuff. And that band kind of grew out of our scene at the Temple Bar. Kneebody played every Monday,
right?
The bar, every Sunday night as well, Temple Bar, and I was playing in tons of bands then, and then studio stuff kind of started coming just along the way through that. When I first moved here, I got a job through a Denver connection at a post-production studio, and I was playing on a bunch of commercials. I was playing bass and guitar and keyboards and some drums on getting to play on like American Express commercials or
cool.
All that stuff. And that lasted for, that job lasted for about 3 months, but those connections kept going. And then I fell into working with a great film composer right around maybe 2000 or 2001, who I still work with on films that he does, doing, and just the studio stuff started to pick up. But for me, it really started to pick up right around 2008. Like, I remember making a real conscious effort so around 2008, I was playing with a really big Italian artist named Ligabue. And I was in Italy a lot. And that was around the time that the Kneebody guys were they're all moving to New York. I remember saying, like, fuck, am I supposed to move to New York too? Like, pardon my French, but like, like that whole thing, like, am I supposed to, you really gauge what your friends are doing. And I remember just saying, like, no, I'm going to stay here and just try to really invest in the music scene and the industry here in Los Angeles. And, so I was playing in that Italian group and still doing Kneebody and still playing with Colin Hay and, doing other things. But also I really started getting more into, I guess, positioning myself to get into some studio situations and also a lot in the writing scene too, like getting to write with people. And that's really where that kind of stuff started to take off for me.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying just before we started, I was went over your wiki page just to see what stood out to me, and just some of the names in there are fairly well known, shall we say? We've got Bruno Mars, CeeLo Green, John Legend, The Boss, Springsteen, Sting. Meshell Ndegeocello.
Yeah.
So it would be awesome to kind of dig into some of this. Kimbra, Sia, there's a bit of a kind of down under.
Yeah.
Yes. Colin Hay, who's Scottish Australian. So yeah, I mean, maybe we'll kick off with Colin, how that came around, what it's like working with him, what you've picked up from him.
Yeah, that was incredible. Around the time when I first started working with Colin, I remember, so I had always known that, Colin Hay from Men at Work lives in Los Angeles. And, I had some friends that had played with him, And also his wife, Cecilia Noel, is a really well-known singer here, and ran and still runs this really well-known band here called Cecilia Noel and then Wild Clams. And they're like a fantastic Latin, just kind of Latin group that's just so good. And so many great musicians kind of came from that band. So I just knew that Colin, you know, it was very active playing, and I grew up hearing the Men at Work music, but
Right.
But that's kind of as far as I had gone with really checking it out. And I remember Nate and we used to play with the singer-songwriter who was kind of like in the vein of John Mayer. It was right around the time that John Mayer got his record deal is when this guy got his record deal, and Nate and I were his band. Like it was Nate and I and then this guy.
You were like the Pinot and
yeah, yes. No, I mean, yeah,
for it.
I definitely have the hype for it. And actually it's funny. Pino and I got to work together a few years back and got to hang out a fair amount. And it turns out our dads are both chefs, which was incredible to find out. But anyway, like, so back then we were doing a tour, and we were doing a show, and we were opening for Colin. And I remember a set, and we were like walking off, like carrying our stuff back to the van across this like green, like there's a green where everybody was sitting, and we're carrying our stuff to the van, like Nate's carrying like a cymbal bag and I'm carrying a bass and maybe something else, you know, and we're walking back to the van, and Colin plays one chord and just sings a note, and he's playing solo. You know, if you ever get to hear him play solo, it's just heaven. Yeah. He plays a chord on the guitar and he sings a note, and Nate and I just dropped our instruments in the grass and just walked back to the side of the stage, like left my bass out on the grass somewhere where, you know, it's like, I've got to watch this show. And we sat on the side of the stage and watched this whole set, and he tells these stories. He sings his ass off and plays and his songs are just so gorgeous. And that's where I was exposed to, you know, his songs that he's been writing. He's always been writing ever since he started, you know, he's just one of these songwriters. And he tells these stories that are just incredible and really engaging, really funny, and also really revelatory and intimate. And like, I had tears in my eyes, and I know Nate was like worked up, and we're both worked up. And I remember, I'll never forget this, like going backstage, like kind of like that, you know, like, huh? Like, you know, like this is, you know, like this is a pretty special night for you, wasn't it? You know, like, you know, like feeling like we knew like this is a big deal for him. Like, cause and I remember saying, like, just going like, wow, you know, like coming up to Colin, you know, just, we had to run to meet him because we were just instantly like fans. And then, and he's just like, thanks boys, you know, gotta go to the next gig, you know, like it was like nothing, you know, like it was just another gig for him. I mean, in that he's so freaking good. And then maybe a couple of years after that, our good friend Charlie Paxson is a drummer, and Charlie was playing with Colin Hay, and they needed a bass player, and Charlie put my name in for it. And we had a gig at Largo, which is a great club out here in LA. And I was like, yes. At that point I was like, are you kidding me? Like I was so waiting for an opportunity to get to play with him because I was just so blown away by that night. And Charlie kind of put my name in, and I got the gig to play that gig.
Yep.
And I learned, I remember learning like 25 songs in 2 days or a day or something, where it was just like, oh my God, like there's all this music and there's so much that goes into those songs. And
straightforward A, B, A, for.
Yeah, there's real parts, you know?
Yeah.
And there's melodies, and we would play some of the Men at Work songs and a lot of his newer songs. And then from there we did a tour. Anyway, it was incredible. We did a quick little tour up the coast. And I remember when I started playing with him, I had been playing with this band called the Diddy Bops leading up, and we were playing with Nickel Creek. We were touring a lot with them, which is that band with Chris Thiele and Sarah Watkins and Sean Watkins, this fantastic bluegrass, new Americana music, like just fantastic group. and they were a real Largo band, and Colin was a real Largo band, meaning the club.
Right.
And I remember when I first started playing with Colin, I think Sean Watkins told me, he's like, you're gonna meet Paul McCartney when you play with them. I was like, get out of here. Like, you know, he's like, yeah, like, cause at the time, Paul's wife was a huge fan of Colin's, his ex-wife. Anyway, so fast forward to that first gig or that first tour I did with Colin, and we did the whole tour, and the last gig was in Los Angeles, and that whole week they had been telling us that Paul was going to be at that gig, and he was at the gig. He was there, and we got to play the show for him, and I mean, it was a crazy experience. Like, the whole night was crazy. Yeah, and then we all got to hang out afterwards.
Wow.
And but bringing it back to Colin, there's I mean, we're still, I consider him a really, really dear friend and really close friend to this day, and he's the best of the best. He's an incredible artist, an incredible.
I also kind of feel like that situation wouldn't faze him either. You know, having a Beatle watch him perform.
Well, he was in he was in, and he's still in Ringo's band, in Ringo's all-star band. But Colin is a huge Beatles fan. I mean, so I can, and I'm sure he'd be comfortable with me saying, like, I mean, it was a big deal. I mean, we were, you know, and I know that Paul, from what I had understood, had come to hear him play a few times, like, and they're friendly, like they've, you know, but I was there. I saw, like, what it meant to him. Like, we wanted to do, you know, we wanted to put on a great show, you know, and it was incredible. It was really cool.
Yeah. Wow. And then two other local acts that I'd love to speak to you about, Kimbra and Sia. You were, musical director for Sia.
Yeah, it was for a short period, but it was a pretty cool experience for me, for sure. It was when she came out with her album, A Thousand Forms of Fear, which Chandelier, and a friend of mine, an old friend of mine, but he's become a fantastic, really, really, really successful, and just is an incredible producer. Who I've known since I was probably 18 or 19, got me in the position to work with her, and to do some shows, to do some TV shows, and to also do a couple of live shows. And it was around the time where she'd taken a real hiatus from performing live, because I think she was on the road for years and years with 07 and then her own projects. And it was a really cool opportunity, and a crazy responsibility to kind of be responsible for, you know, that type of live music making, and dealing with TV, and dealing with running tracks and all that stuff, which was I'd been around it a bit, especially with the Italian band I was in, which is a really kind of high profile group, but being the one responsible for that was pretty.
So you're the liaison between the artist and the band, and the artist and the TV techs and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. And I, you know, for those gigs, it was really like, it was kind of flying by the seat. I was flying by the seat of my pants, where it's just like, you know, got it. Like, you know, we played the Hollywood Bowl and it was like, you know, playing, you know, all these like massive hits that she's written, and that like, you know, Diamonds, the Rihanna song, and then also like her big hits and everything. And so it was really intense, kind of getting that.
Chandelier came on the radio. It just like, I just remember, it just blew me away. It's just such a epic song, and it was
Yes.
on the radio for a long time as well.
Yes. Yeah, no, it was, yeah. And the first time I heard it, it's just like, oh, this song's incredible. So yeah, that was a really cool experience. It was an amazing experience. Like I wish that I'd been a part of, I didn't get to tour with her or to get to do, I had hoped that there would be more than what I did, but what I did was I got to, do Saturday Night Live with her, and we did that Hollywood Bowl show. We did some I think radio promo and some stuff with VH1, and I mean it was an incredible experience. And she's an incredible artist and person, and she happens to be Colin Hay's goddaughter, which was a total crazy coincidence. Yeah, because her father and he are really close friends.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so was Kimbra before or after?
I think Kimbra was maybe before. So yeah, I got to work on a song on her first album.
Yeah.
I got to play, I think there's a few basses on the song, but I think my bass is somewhere in there on that song, Settle Down. And along with Chris Bruce, who's a fantastic guitar and bass player, good friend of mine, hero of a lot of people. He's a great musician, so he's on there too. And then when I did that session, she and I and Keefus, who's our old friend from Denver, who produced this stuff, right. We wrote like a couple of sketches, and one of the songs became Love in High Places, which was on her second album. Cool. That I co-wrote the song, but I play a little bass on it, but Thundercat plays like the main bass on that song, he just sounds incredible.
Yeah. And so these are all being recorded in LA.
Yeah. She was out here a lot, quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And that was really neat. When I met her, I was going over to kind of work on some of the stuff. And then that was a really cool, like, worlds colliding thing where I walked in and, I said, my name, and I'm in this other band called Kneebody. She's like, oh, I know Kneebody. Like, oh my God. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And that was a really cool, like, worlds colliding moment. And then I ended up helping to bring her with us. So we did a few shows together, actually, where she sang with our band, and you could see them there's some stuff on YouTube. Like, we did a show at LPR in New York, and we did a couple of things at the Blue Whale out here. And then she had Ben and I play with her. She did a residency at the Bootleg, probably about 4 years ago now.
I was just listening to some of our most recent stuff, and some of it is super funky. Some of our newer releases, it's like, is this Prince, or like, what's going on? It was really cool.
She's incredible. She's so great, and she's such a great producer.
I was gonna say, and the production is just, it's such an amazing tapestry. There's so much.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It is a tapestry. I remember when she was doing, just watching her work and just, pop open the laptop and then like, just, oh, I've got this cool horn sample and I've got this other thing, and she's moving things around, and she's really fluid with technology like that. And then also she's just an incredible improviser. Like, with Kneebody, like we would play, or she, and you've anybody who just looks for her on YouTube can just see countless performances where she's just improvising and constructing just amazing music on the spot. She's the real deal for sure.
And interestingly, when I was listening to that album, it was on Spotify, and you know how Spotify just goes on and plays the next, here's something else you might like. And it put me on to the new Becca Stevens album.
Yeah. Wow.
You are connected with.
Yeah. I co-wrote 2 songs on that album. That's
a beautiful sounding album as well.
Yes. yeah, it's an incredible record, and Becca is so good. Yeah,
Is she on the Ground Up label, the Snarky Puppy?
yep, she is. Yeah,
Michael League Empire.
yeah. Who actually, I met him in Melbourne. I met him at the when we played at the Melbourne Jazz Festival.
Oh.
When I met Claire Cross.
Oh. So that must have been 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago.
It's such a blur. You could say 10 and I would believe you, or 1. It's like at this point. But no, I think it was probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, sounds about, yeah, because I got here about 6 years ago, and I think Snarky Puppy came out a year or two after. So
it was also right when everyone was talking about Hiatus Coyote in Melbourne. They were just like, it was like it seemed, it might not have been, but it just seemed like it was the first year where it's like everyone's like, there's this band here in Melbourne, you would not believe your ears, like they're incredible, they're called Hiatus Coyote. And we're like, oh wow, and we played our show, Kneebody played our show, and we had been hearing about Snarky Puppy, and we met those guys, and a lot of my friends, or some of the Kneebody guys, knew them already because a lot of them lived in New York, and then we met some of the Hiatus Coyote people, and they had come to our show, and then we went to their. My God, it's incredible.
yeah,
we understood what they meant. How great they were.
My first Hiatus Coyote as well, and it's like it's so, they're so together, but also they can be so wild, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. They walk that line of like just of chaos, but then also it's just like it just comes to a head,
Similar ethos to the Kneebody vibe, I guess.
I would definitely say so. Yeah.
But they also have a real attention to production and sound.
God, yeah.
Like everything sounds as it should.
Sounds incredible. Yeah. I heard them. I got to hear them. It was a while ago now, but at the Roxy out here, and that's a beautiful little club or sound system to hear music. And God, they sounded incredible. It was great.
Looking down this list, what was your involvement with Meshell?
When I first met Meshell, it was probably around 10 years ago, maybe a little. Like so many people, I've been such a huge fan of hers. For me, since the first record of hers came out, and she was just one of those people like on a short list of current influences for everyone almost. Yeah. And
because it was kind of like a melding of hip hop as well, wasn't it? So that was probably
very much so. Yeah, it was like mid-90s, and her album Plantation Lullabies came out, and I was already really into Steve Coleman, and she's on a Steve Coleman record.
Right.
But yeah, that album came out, and it was just like, if you loved Prince, and if you loved hip hop, if you loved Bjork, if you loved, I remember Everything But the Girl was really huge at the time. Portishead was really huge at the time. And, just as a musician, like, Portishead or Bjork's album Post comes out, and Meshell's album Plantation Lullabies comes out right around the same time. And you also have like Soul Coughing is out around the same time. And it's like this like period of like, Mitchell Froom and Chad Blake have the Latin Playboys, and it's just like the music is just so cool. But Meshell is just, and I'm a huge fan, but I got to, again, my friend Keithus had a session. It was a writing session where I went over to his studio, and I know he had been working with her, and they had worked together on a couple of her projects. And I had heard him play with her and Chris Bruce and Mark Kelly from The Roots, who plays in The Roots now, but Mark was playing with her as her bass player. And Deontony Parks, and Deontony's a friend, it's just a small world. But anyway, So I just, at that point I had friends, we had friends in common, and I went over and I knew, but I didn't know that she was going to be there. And I came over to Keith's house and I had my double gig bag, or my gig bag with 2 bass slots. And I had my bass in it and I had an electric guitar in it, which is usually when I come to writing sessions, I'll have both, you know. Okay. And I walked in and I looked, and we were writing for this artist who's an Irish artist, actually. Really great, talented artist. And yeah, and I looked, and there's Keith's, there's the artist, and then there's Meshell. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, what am I doing here? Like, why do I have, you know, like a bass, you know, why would I?
Should I come back in half an hour, guys?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. And so I just decided I'm going to play guitar. And but then from there, we just really hit it off. She's such a beautiful, incredibly beautiful person, has become one of my closest friends. We wrote a couple of things for this artist, and we had done another session with him, and then from there she and I became friends, and man, and that was, you know, and then that was also when I was working with that Italian artist, and she was just like, you know, she knew I wrote, she was just like, send me ideas for I'm writing for my next album. And I was like, oh, geez. And so I that I had made on my computer and with the guitar and bass or whatever in my hotel room in Italy. And I sent them to her. And then she's like, you know, I didn't hear anything back, and we would just text or write about different things or whatever, but I didn't want to push it. And then the next time I saw her, we all hung out with my daughter and her family, and then just as I was leaving, she said, oh yeah, I wrote to your song, you know, like, and I was like, what, you know, and I just closed the door and left, and I was like, what song, what, you know, like, what did you like, you know, like, and then fast forward to like maybe a year, maybe 6 months later, they were recording that music here in LA, and because that was in New York where we hung out, and you know, fast forward to like, you know, the recording, and then she called me and she was like, I need you to play bass on this song. Or maybe Chris Bruce called me. He's like, I need you to play bass on this song. And I was like, okay, I'm playing bass. I don't want to play bass on this song, you know, and because she wanted me to send her a chart for the song or something. Because I did something in my demo. I did this like a thing, and it's kind of ambiguous, maybe where the notes, like what note has the bass or whatever. And anyway, I showed up to the studio, and it turns out we're recording that song. Like, and I didn't know like, I didn't know what the arrangement is. Like, because a lot of times you'll send an idea, and then that idea will get like chopped up, and it'll get rearranged, and maybe there's a bridge that you don't know about, or maybe there's, you know, but it turns out that she had written to the exact, like, you know, maybe it's like 3 minutes and 40 seconds is what like my demo was. That's how long the song is, like, you know, and she had written these amazing lyrics to this musical idea. I played bass on it, and it's the song Conviction that's on her album Comet Come to Me. And that was a beautiful experience and beautiful session for it to, you know, and it just kind of came together in a crazy way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you've also produced a couple of your own albums, right?
Yeah. In the last couple of years, I just always been really just in awe of all my friends, my close friends, making amazing records. And just like, you know, some of these people I've been talking about, like Shane's record, Second Guess, his first album is so great. And his album after that came out maybe 5 years later is just so incredible. Ben's records are amazing. And Nate, I remember his first album, Reliving. I think he wrote everything and played everything when he was 22 or 23. I remember we were doing Kneebody, and he's also just making this ridiculous solo record. And it was just like, where do I fit in here? And Adam was making these amazing records. You know, you just see your friends making records, and then you're like, all right, where do I put my foot in to the rushing river of, and you put yourself out there. And I've been a sideman for so many years, and as you maybe know, or lots of bass players listening know, like as a sideman, you stand behind the artist and you're like, you critique everything, like like I could have, he's not realizing, like he should be playing this song, or like, why don't we ever go to the soul, like all of that stuff goes out the window when you do your own project.
All right, now it's your turn.
Yeah, now it's your turn. Like, put your money where your mouth is.
But bass players, it's that kind of mindset of we're meant to. We're in the background. I didn't become a bass player to be in the spotlight. Even though I do run my own band and stuff like that, it's not. I'm not out the front playing bass melodies with the guys.
Right.
It's write music for the band, and I play bass in the band.
Right. And yeah, as bass players, that's a great question to have. And that's something, like a conversation that, to be honest, like I wish I could have had at a younger age, like just that conversation, like what you just said of because as bass players, we're so used to seeing these wonderful bass records, like word of mouth, or, Jocko's first record, or,
I was listening to some Stanley Clarke yesterday with my son. I just
very cool.
Took me right back to being when I was 14 and just being like, wait, you can do this on the bass? Like it was like bass from space, but it's still incredible music.
Yeah.
When I hear it, I'm like, of course that's the correct musical voice for this song.
Yeah.
Some people can do it.
Yeah. And and more power to them. I've really felt that pressure to, like, if I'm going to have this bass album, or if I'm going to have an album, it's got to, am I going to be doing this stuff that like there's a technicality that I have that I just, but sometimes it's like, what am I putting on display here? Like, what am I
to be reviewed in Bass Player Magazine or not?
Well, and to be fair, like, I love those people there. And I also, and I love, and it's just weird to come to terms with that. It's like, so like for me, it was just like, I didn't necessarily want to make a record where it's just like, cause I've always been a collaborator of songwriting. Like I'd always written songs, my own songs, or I'd written songs in bands I was in. And then I had this co-writing world and co-producing world where it was, there's that kind of songwriting. And for the first record I made, it was just like, so I'd spent years making one record, which is the last record that came out, which is an album called Haunted This Way. It came out in November of 2019. And I spent a long time on it. And it's like, it was a record I was really influenced by, great songwriter records, or I was listening a ton to the Plastic Ono band, like Shaved Fish. And it also had the sound to me, like, I really like that kind of Sebadoh sound, like Lou Barlow and Dinosaur Jr. and like this kind of like jagged kind of a sound to it. And so maybe there's a little bit of that in there or something, but it was like, I was so carefully working on these songs that it got pretty cumbersome for me. Cause it's like, oh my God, like I kept looking at all of my friends and their projects, and then they're just kind of moving on with their lives. And like they have album 1, album 2, album 3. And I'm just like still working on the chorus for this one song, you know what I mean? And so while I was doing that, I finished that record, and I remember taking it to a good friend of mine who's a great bass player out here, and just like, I just want to put this by you. Like, what do you think of this? And, anyway, I had it suggested by him and a couple other people. They're like, do you want to make a bass record? Like, they're like, I love this album, Michael. I love how it sounds and everything, but like, do you want to make a bass record? And I was like, I'm just picturing like playing Donna Lee, or, like, is that what that means? Like, does it have to be like that? And, I should know better that it doesn't have to be like that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I ended up making this album, Light of Love, which is, my first record, but technically it's my second, because I hadn't, I made that album, and that album was so much fun to make. And it came out of jam sessions with friends, with my dear friend Scott Seaver, who's a drummer from Denver, but who also plays with Tenacious D and Amy Mann and plays with a lot of people, and also with Chris Dave, the drummer Chris Dave, and we got together and just had some sessions where I had a lot of ideas, like some ideas, but then I also had these sessions where it was like, you know, we just jam when we come to a figure that feels really cool. And then I would come back and like cull that material and find like, okay, from here to here is like this cool moment. Okay, let's put that in a folder, and on and on and on.
I'm guessing you've got a few folders with cool ideas.
Yeah. I mean, you know, a cool idea is in the eye of the beholder. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and so that album, Light of Love, was so much fun to make because it was way more carefree, and it was way more collaborative. So like, that's where, you know, Becca Stevens and we wrote the song A Little Too Late, and Gabby Moreno and I wrote a song, and Mike Viola and I wrote a song, and then I had this bass line that was this cool riff that we all jammed over, and then Nicholas Payton played over that song, and
actually I had his cousin Max Moran on the podcast.
His cousin is Max Moran.
Yeah, bass player who lives in
New Orleans.
New Orleans, yeah.
Oh man. Oh, what family! Jeez.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. He's incredible. Or Nicholas is just so incredible, and talk about a polymath. Like, he plays incredible drums and double bass, and great. You know, he does it in his band where he'll play Fender Rhodes and play trumpet. Man, he's good.
Jeez.
But yeah, so it felt really good to finally, put, and with me, with my weird rambly career, it really felt good to start making albums under my own name. Cause there's nothing like, I think for anybody that you meet that, has a career in music, like, people know them for certain pockets that they're in. Like, certain people know me as, like, I'm that bass player that played in that Italian band. I'm the Italian bass player. Or, like, I'm the Kneebody guy, or I'm the guy who, worked with whatever, like, there's always these, like, pockets, and there's nothing like making your own thing that just kind of, like, it's just kind of a snapshot of where you're at and what you're doing. And I guess that goes into, like,
there's the danger you make your own thing and then people don't hire you anymore because you think that you're a solo artist and you're off doing your own thing.
Oh God. Yeah. There's a danger in everything, right? It's just like, but I do know what you mean. Like, that is that is a danger of, like, and I think there are people that don't make their own projects because they're very cognizant of that. And I hopefully, this is, knock on wood, like, I just love being a collaborator, and I love working with people on their projects, and whether it's, like, as a sideman or getting to write with them or getting to produce a song or work on something. But I also really love to make my own music too, which why not be able to do all that stuff?
Yeah. And it's, it's easier than ever nowadays to produce it and put it out there.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
One of the more recent recordings as well that I enjoyed is the Bob Reynolds guitar band.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's a pretty cool project.
Yeah. And that was an incredible project in that that was really funny in a way. It's a really cool record. And it was, but really that record was a night. It was he booked a gig at the Blue Whale, which is, was a wonderful place here in LA. And right around the time of NAMM, so that's when a lot of musicians are in town in Los Angeles. You have people that wouldn't normally be here, some people, and Mark Lettieri from Texas was here, guitar player, and Nira Felder was here, and then Sput was here, and then we had a gig, and Bob booked this gig, and Bob had these songs that were really great songs, and really just straightforward. Like there's not a lot of like crazy twists and turns, but he's like, we're going to record this. We're also going to record it in video. Like we're going to do a video thing. And like, we had never gotten together to rehearse, nothing. Like we just were just reading he'd given us the music ahead of time.
Yeah.
But it was like, it was a really cool exercise in just like, okay, this is going to be for posterity, like whether you know it or like it or not. And it ended up being this beautiful night that was captured, and it's like the videos are really beautiful.
Yeah.
And cool.
And everybody's really concentrating.
Yeah, because we did two sets. We did two sets, and some of the songs we did twice, but the crowd's just right there on top of us. And
it looked quite warm. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we all have a balmy kind of like, it was kind of sweaty. And what was funny was I remember going on the road with Kneebody to Europe a couple of years later, or that album had been out. Bob is just he's so good. He's such a great musician, and he's also, his sense of his business and his music and his sites and all that stuff is just so dialed in.
What you're saying, he's got his shit together.
He's he's such inspiration. I'm like, I'm very much in awe, and the music really stands for itself. It's really fantastic. But I was telling him, I was writing him a text message that everywhere I went on that Kneebody tour, wherever we were, like all the things that I've been a part of and I've done, and gotten to play with people, nothing about any of it. Like when I talked to people after a show, like maybe we're selling CDs or t-shirts or whatever, and everyone was just coming up just being like, oh, Bob Reynolds, you play with Bob Reynolds. And I was like, man, it was just one gig, man, a great gig. I loved it. I'd love to do more, and we actually did. We did.
He's super visible on YouTube, right? I mean, if you're searching for jazz stuff, he pops up. And so it's one of those things. Cause I get turned on to him from checking out a bunch of Yannick Gwizdala stuff.
Right. That's right. And I heard Yannick's interview with you.
Cool. Yeah, it was one of my very first ones.
That was a great interview. Yeah, exactly. So that was a cool experience. And we did a few more of those, like, and it would be like every year right around the NAMM show, there would be a gig, and they're always really fun.
Did you ever check out, kind of related, but did you ever check out the John Patitucci guitar quartet album?
No. What, who's on that? What is that?
It's kind of like John Patitucci on his new custom Yamaha
hollow body kind of thing.
Yamaha electric thing.
Right.
And then there's the two guitar players whose names a blank, but I will quickly Google Patitucci, because it's I think you'd really dig it. I think it's kind of up your alley. Is Patitucci an influence, an inspiration to you? And I mean, did you ever get into what he did? He wasn't really. I mean, I've always had huge respect for him, as he was really popular when I was starting as a bass player. The Chick Corea electric band and acoustic band were just massive. But I just kind of, I kept that at arm's length for whatever reason, and I didn't really dive into it. But everything I've ever seen and heard of him has been fantastic. I mean, that guy's amazing. He's incredible. And Brian Blade, Adam Rogers, and Steve Cardenas.
That's right. Steve Cardenas plays in that band. I remember hearing about that.
Killer on that as well.
Man, yeah. Okay. Well, that's incredible.
That's what it's called, not the guitar thing. But yeah, I think of it as like a guitar quartet, because it's two electric guitars, electric bass, and drums. It's pretty cool.
Well, geez, that's what I'm going to listen to tonight. That's amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe quickly, just you're definitely a P-bass guy.
Yeah. I have a lot of other basses, but the one
jazz bass in that rack, because in most of the stuff I've seen and heard, it's definitely P-bass or like Music Master or something, just kind of like one pickup, neck pickup vibe.
Yeah. I've got, you know, a couple of jazz basses and a couple of those.
Are they strung with flats?
I have, I've got, no, the jazz basses are with round wounds. I've got 4 P basses. 2 of them have flats on them. I've got a couple of those Music Masters. Those have round wounds. I've got a Hofner and a couple of those Gibson basses, the EB2 and EBO.
Okay. And hollow body things.
Yeah, one of the EB2 is the hollow body, and then the EBO is the SG kind of a thing, and that sounds amazing, but it's just never really made it onto anything because I just find for me that a lot of the times it just always kind of comes back to the P bass for me.
Yep.
I've got a Music Man Stingray, one of the Bernard Edward era, and sometimes these things find themselves on recordings, but a lot of times it's either the P bass, which is the number one I usually play.
Really kind of blue. Or, you got it's like a kind of
blue. Yeah, it's like the greenish bluish one.
Turquoisey.
And this guy right here.
It's seen a few gigs.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it an indentation after the pickguard where your thumb rests?
Yeah, it's where the thumb goes. It's been worn down. It's a 64 P bass, but I've had it for I think I've had it for maybe 15 years. I got it on the road. Nate and I were on the road, and we got it in St. Paul, Minnesota at Willie's Guitars. And I ended up maybe 2 years ago buying another bass, a jazz bass at Willie's Guitars. Yeah. That's a great shop, actually. But yeah, usually if I'm lucky enough to get called into a session where, you know, sometimes with a new producer or a new artist, you kind of want to bring all your tools, you know, and you don't want to just show up with one instrument. And I'll bring, you know, maybe a number of instruments, and little by little, and it's always cool. It's like, oh, let's hear what this one sounds like, and let's hear what this. And little by little, it just kind of gets whittled down to this bass. But this bass or a Hofner, Hofner.
That's partly because that's really where you're at home playing as well, and you
totally
where you're more expressive on it.
I agree. It's not to say that I couldn't, you know, if my number one had been like the jazz or whatever, it wouldn't be that. And for years, for me, the only bass I ever owned, the only electric was one of the jazzes that I have. Like that was from 1995 to probably, you know, 2006. You know, it was just that one bass. You know, so
if you want to play those Meshell lines, you have to have that jazz bass bite, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
And do you ever take any like outboard gear to sessions, like a DI or a preamp or something like that you go, this is part of it, or you?
I have sometimes, and that just depends. I've got like one of the BAE, the 1173.
Okay.
Or I've got Tone Hammer tube DI direct box.
The Aguilar thing.
No, no, not Tone Hammer. There's it's called I misspoke. It's called the Tone Craft. The company's called Tone Craft, and they make a tube DI that's really nice.
That's a massive, big.
It is, yeah. And I'll bring one of those, or I've got a Tone Hammer, the Aguilar pedal or DI as well.
Yeah.
And I have brought those on some recordings. And then some I just don't, or sometimes I'll bring an amp and sometimes I don't, you know.
Yeah. Any amp preferences that you like, speaker sizes, 15s?
Well, I play professionally. I play Aguilar speakers and amps. They've been just really great for me for live stuff for years, and such a supportive company. And so I'll either bring a cabinet of theirs, and I also have an Ampeg SB12 that all just a 12-inch speaker, sometimes for like kind of a like a mic'd sound. That's a nice warmed. It's just like a flip top kind of a thing, with a smaller speaker.
Okay.
And I'll and then, you know, depending on what the project is, I'll a lot of times I'll bring a bunch of different effects and pedals and stuff. If it's like a thing where I'm there to write and be overly creative, yeah, there'll be, you know, different. Yeah, there'll be delays and distortions and stuff. But if it's a straight up bass session, it's more like I'll have an octave or two and a tuner. Yeah, exactly. But actually, you know, a pedal that's really great is, you know, Kurt Biscara, the great drummer.
Yeah.
He has made a bass pedal.
Is it just a mute?
Totally.
It's awesome pedal, Kaveh, made for you especially.
Yeah. Yeah. This pedal, it's called the Grease Juicer. Classic. It's an envelope filter, but it's
cool. I love
great.
It's
so cool.
Do you have it plugged in just now?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. So like, you know, I like that kind of like bubbly, but like nice, just dark, you know, having it kind of, you know, come out every now and then.
So is that in production? Like you can order it kind of thing, or?
Yeah, I think you can. He'd be psyched if I said this. I'm absolutely receiving no compensation. In fact, I bought this pedal. It was really funny. He's just like, his partner is just like, yeah, you want this pedal, you know, and it's like, it's going to be X amount of dollars. I was like, cool. All right. I'm doing it, you know, I've been so happy with it. It's made its way onto a lot of different things.
Have you had much chance to play with Kurt Biscara?
A fair amount in the last few years. There's a band that he has with Tos Panos and Satnam Rangotra that is this really cool group that sometimes I'll play bass or sometimes another bass player will, and Darren Johnson will sometimes play keyboards, or Jeff Babco. And that's a really fun band where it's just a groove group where it's all improvised, and the three of them have such a hookup, those three drummers, and you know, the you know, bass and keys will just kind of like figure out where to fit in, or we'll start something and then they'll.
I get turned on to a lot of these like Tos Panos and stuff by listening to the I'd Hit That podcast.
Yes.
Were you a guest on that?
I was. Yeah.
That's an amazing collection of interviews.
It really is. There's so much great, and I don't know if he's done stuff in a little while. For whatever reason.
He brought it back. He brought it back with like a Patreon thing, and I was like, all right, if this is what it takes for you to keep making interviews, I signed up and I was, you know, subscribed to his Patreon, but then he just kind of dropped off. I don't know what happened. I was kind of worried actually.
Yeah. I'll have to reach out to him because I agree. It was so great to hear that, you know, and some people I know really well and some people I've heard of, and just to hear their stories has always been so, you know, fascinating.
And that was kind of like when this became a thing, because this podcast thing just kind of like grew. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm making podcasts now. But his style was something that I kind of wanted to try and keep in mind, like conversational, trying to get to questions that maybe don't always ask, or, you know,
right.
Yeah, like no holds barred as well. If you whatever you want to talk about or say, that's cool. But maybe not quite as gritty. as Dave.
Yeah, he'll go there.
Yeah. I really like that about him. Well, I'm gonna call it a day there. Let you go and probably not go get ready for a gig, but whatever your rest of your Friday night entails.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and
Thanks, man.
getting to talk to you. I mean, you know, I don't know when this is going to air, but I imagine that you know, the problems that we're facing in the world will still very much be there. So it's just been nice having this conversation. It's been really great.
Same here, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. If people want to reach out or, you know, check out what you're doing, Instagram's a good place, I'm guessing.
Totally. Yeah. Instagram's great. I have a website and a YouTube and all that stuff, but you can always reach me kind of anywhere. It's pretty easy to find.
Yeah. I mean, I got to you, so it can't be that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Good job. Good job.
Yeah. All right, Kaveh, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me.
It's my pleasure, Craig. Thank you.
I'll see you next time. Thanks, man.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.